We are back with another episode of Boots, Balls and Bras with myself, Fara and Anita Asante. Neats, before we get into this weekend madness of WSL football, I seen you were out. Was it date night? I just saw some really nice food on your Instagram during the week. What was that?
Yeah, I'm not going to plug the restaurant too hard, but brand new restaurant where we live in Wales in Penarth, and yeah, we had a little lunch date, myself and Beth, and without baby, so it was delightful.
Nice.
Do you know what I
Must
mean?
be nice, yeah?
It was no disruptions. I can actually eat my food when it's warm and hot for a
Nice,
change.
nice. You been up to anything else this week? I mean, I went on Thursday to the EA launch. That's probably the only thing since we last spoke. I
Which
went to the
I
EA
mean, that
launch in
looks sick, by the way.
So yeah, that was pretty cool. Seen a few Chelsea players, so that was nice. Sancho was there, Felix was there, and Palmer. So obviously the
Are you
Chelsea fans,
fangirling?
a little bit pretending I wasn't, but kind of like, oh, they're there, like like one of them ones.
Did you actually play any of the games, Farrah? Did you play a game against anyone?
Neat. I mean, look, when I was a kid, I used to be so bad at losing, right? That I
Yeah.
used to just like pull out the plugs, like turn the telly off and all that. So I didn't want to embarrass myself and like do that again. So I just kind of like took pictures if I knew what I was doing. But yeah, it wasn't for me. But where are you
Fair.
now? You're out. You're out now. What, in Switzerland? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
I'm in Switzerland. I'm here sort of for a UEFA event. Big, you know, promotion, I guess, for the Euros next summer. Ticket launch and everything like that. So yeah, they're just trying to jumpstart all the ticket sales and what Switzerland is going to offer, hopefully, which will be an amazing tournament next summer.
Nice, but not just ticket sales. You're getting your boots back on, right?
Well, something like that. I'm going to try. I'm going to try.
Rather you
Might need to
than
borrow
me. Rather
someone's
you.
Asper pump, I'm not gonna lie, but
In it, rather you than me. Anyway, let's get into WSL. I was at the Manchester City Brighton game, and obviously the opening game, I thought Manchester City, given the fact that a lot of us thought they might be title contenders this year, and obviously Brighton had a really good. I was going to say a bright start. That would have sounded a bit like I'd practiced it. Brighton had a bright start, but they did. They had a bright start against Everton with a 4-0 win, and we kind of didn't know what to expect going into this game. But I mean, I don't know if you watched it. I was there, and I was mesmerised by some of the risky playing out from the back that Brighton had. Like they honestly were just like so comfortable. Like they were so well coached. They were so well drilled in what they did. And it wouldn't surprise me if they pull off some shocks this season in terms of results. I don't know if you saw and what you thought of Brighton before we touch on Man City.
yeah, no, I watched the game as well, and it brought me back to the old school days when I used to try and Cruyff turn on the edge of my
Mate,
box.
I'm
And
so glad you said that. I was gonna say that the centre half.
Karabali.
Yeah, the Colombian. Obviously, we've seen her in the World Cups before, and obviously in the Olympics. But yeah, I mean, what a player! Neat. That is what you did, right? Talk to me about talk to us a little bit about how high risk that is, and what kind of like attributes you need, or is it just a confidence thing? Like, what is it that like a player, a centre half, needs to be able to play and perform the way that obviously she did, and I know that you did when I played with you.
I mean, it's high risk for those that don't believe in that style of football or don't believe in trying to possess and play your way out of pressure. But for me, I think it just reflected how confident she is
Mm.
and maybe the trust that she has from her manager and her teammates that she can find a way to get out of those situations. And she's confident enough to play out, beyond pressure. And also it brings an excitement again to the game of football, in my opinion, that it's not just stale, pass, that there are individual qualities that players can actually show, what they can do.
Yeah, I mean the way they played out needs. I mean, I was surprised. I thought it was really high risk. I feel like obviously having Vicky Lasada in there, I think in terms of that composure, knowing how to put their foot
Hmm.
on the ball and kind of dictating the rhythm really helps. I think if you have a player like that in that midfield, I mean, you know what it's like when you played in there, people trusted to give you the ball. But their left hand side, how Brighton worked their left hand side, Patterson really high, she's a fullback and obviously played really high. And he had the wide player that tucked in forward and just caused a little bit of chaos in terms of that kind of movement. Fullback didn't know if to come in, wide player didn't know if to press the centre half or track the fullback. And they got in a lot of times in that opening 45 down Manchester City's left hand side. sorry, Manchester City's right hand side, but it was a former player you coached, right, from Bristol,
Yeah,
that was making her debut in terms of
yeah.
starting.
I think that I agree with you, Farah. I think multiple things happened in this game that was so interesting. I think tactically they were set up perfectly for the personnel that they had on the pitch from a Brighton standpoint. You know, the 3-4-3 sort of system. You know, centre backs that are comfortable in that position. You got Poppy playing a bit higher on the left hand side, able to combine, but it almost worked in their favour as well because Man City had players playing out of position. You had Naomi Lazelle, who I've worked with at Bristol City, who I think is a super, you know, young talent, so much potential. But her traditional position is a centre back, and that's her strengths are, you know, the attributes that she has in a centre back role. So she's not that accustomed to being in that full back, you know, wing back kind of role where Man City have fullbacks roll inside and invert or get really high up the pitch and be attacking minded, because she's largely more defensive minded. So I think, you know, she's trying to do things, I think, that Man City want her to do, which is take up higher positions up the pitch. But then when she does that, obviously they had space to exploit. And because she seemed a little bit tentative at times, they were able to find, you know, those side triangles in the channel and wide areas. Yeah. And I just was so impressed with Brighton, the composure. You know, they were popping it, weren't they? They were like finding combinations. You got, you know, I've never seen, I don't think Poppy, even in the 23s when we've worked with her, what was she doing? Rolling on the ball, doing like Zinedine Zidane moves.
I would agree. I mean, you work with a current crop of 23, so obviously you work more recently with her. But I obviously worked, I think it was 2 years back now, with Poppy, and as I said, certainly didn't play with that same composure and kind of skill level that I guess that the manager gives her the freedom to do in that expression. Because I actually thought she was a standout player for me for that Brighton team in terms of what she did, and she can defend. I thought she was very good defensively. You know, she had to do a lot of getting forward and kind of allowing that wide play infield, but defensively she was equally as good. So yeah, I was, as I said, I was really impressed with Brighton, and I think in terms of for the rest of the season, I think there'll be a surprise package for sure. Obviously, they made 12 changes. We knew that coming into it, and the manager's newish. Obviously, come midway through last season, so yeah, they're an exciting one, I would say, to look out for. But let's talk a little bit about Man City, because last week on the pod we spoke about their performance at the Emirates against Arsenal, and we spoke how good we felt Arsenal was. In terms of their pressing and kind of stifling. But I felt a little bit of a repeat pattern in terms of Manchester City style. Obviously, we know predominantly they're that possession-based team. They play with high intensity. They're a high pressing team, but also speed play. So in terms of how they play when they have that possession, it's always been, the intensity has always been high and quick, and you know, they're not laboured in their possession, are they? And you know, I'm so used to seeing Chloe Kelly out on the right, obviously Lauren Hemp out on the left, and then obviously the target player in Bunny Shaw, where they would get crosses into the box. They've made a few signings, and I mean, look, I was absolutely buzzing for them to sign Vivian Miedema, and I thought, oh, this could be the difference. This could be the player that kind of gets them over the line. They've finished second 6 times in the last 8 seasons, so they've become that kind of runner-up team. And I thought Viv could be the player that kind of changes that.
Sure.
I don't know what you think about her positioning in terms of, we know Manchester City like to play a 4-3-3. They have a holding player, Hasegawa, and then they have, like, I don't know what you want to call them, 8s, 10s, but not a natural 10. So not a 10 that sits higher than the 8. They kind of play parallel and kind of play half the pitch. So if you're on the left-hand side and you're the 8 or 10, you kind of have the left-hand side to kind of operate on. And if you're the right, you kind of have the right. Whereas Viv at Arsenal as a 10 kind of had the freedom to float all the way across the pitch between lines and also get an advance.
Yeah.
Do you think that position isn't going to get the best out of her? Because watching her, from my point of view, I mean, she was in pockets in those spaces for too long. She's somebody that likes the ball quite early into her, and it just wasn't happening. And you could kind of see that frustration. But obviously, as a new player, she wasn't expressing it. But I could kind of sense there was that little bit of frustration with her. And you know, for a player of that quality, for me, her involvement needs to be more. I don't know what you felt on that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I thought this season Man City are going to come out flying out the blocks. You know, we're here, we're ready to challenge. We're gutted from last season. And I don't think we really saw that in the first game against Arsenal. And I think against Brighton, in terms of Miedema, we know what kind of impact she can have. But I think she's a little bit stifled because Man City do play in that kind of rigid way, even though it's effective for them. because of the personnel that they have had. That, you know, like you said, Hemp on the left, Chloe on the right, whoever's there, dynamic players, which stretch teams typically, which gives you room. But in general, their general play, I just felt is slower.
Yeah, a lot slower.
So there's almost two prongs to this. I thought in the first instance, there were times where she picked up decent spaces, but the ball didn't come into her quick enough.
Yeah.
Right. And then on the flip side of that, she's sharing those half spaces now with Jess Park, who is equally effective in those tight spaces. So she doesn't have the freedom in a very disciplined, tactical sort of system that Man City play to just roam around, I think.
Yeah.
And that's where you lack what she can really offer, I think, because she needs that kind of spontaneity and off the cuff to just work off different players. Whereas now it seems like she's just having to work off one side, one half of the pitch to some degree. And it's just a little less fluid. I mean, I don't know how you felt about that, but I think, you know, that's what it looked like to me. And she hasn't quite found the rhythm yet and the connections, perhaps.
Yeah, no, exactly that. That's how it felt. I mean, look, one of my favourite WSL players, certainly current WSL players, I think her stats and what she's done in the WSL speaks for itself. So we don't have to hype her up to kind of let everybody know what she's about. We already know that. But the qualities that she possesses, I felt like Manchester City maybe signed her as a number 9 that could either play alongside Bunny, maybe challenge Bunny Shaw for kind of that 9 position, or they might change their kind of midfield in terms of allowing her to kind of be that single 10 that can get closer to Bunny Shaw. But I certainly feel her only having or being able to operate off that one half of the pitch doesn't really suit her. She's far too deep at times in terms of picking up possession of the ball and getting into areas in terms of a distance away from Bunny Shaw. I felt at times the distance was way too big to kind of have any impact. And also, those positions, they require you to defend. And I'm not saying Vivian Miedema can't, but, you know, a player of her quality isn't somebody that I want to be, you know, tracking back as a teammate. I don't want her to be all the way back in our half tracking players back. So I think the way in which Manchester City play and have kept playing, they bought better or they bought more competition, should I say. I wouldn't say so much better players, because I'd argue that the way that Manchester City play, if they want to get the very best out of their wingers, from what I've seen so far, Chloe Kelly should be playing off the right-hand side. I don't know what, is it Virginia? Is that how you say it? Is that Virgino, sorry, the one that plays off the right-hand side? I just feel like when she gets into areas, you know, on that right-hand side, in terms of deliveries into the box or making quick decisions, it's very slow. But I also feel like in their press, where Manchester City is so effective, she also doesn't know the triggers. Now, I know, of course, when you have a new player and there's a language barrier, I understand that will take time. But I don't feel you have time in this league for those things to happen.
No,
you know, I think it's, you know, results. You need results quite quickly. You don't play that many games. And already we're looking at, you look at the table and you're looking at goals. Well, Manchester City, you know, they're only on +1.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of goal difference. I don't know. What did you feel about that right hand side? I mean, I don't know what you think about Chloe Kelly, but I'm just thinking of Bunny Shaw's. I'm thinking of Bunny Shaw's strength. Now, where a lot of her goals come from is those deliveries from wide areas, and I feel like they're not in there. And Chloe's somebody that would deliver the ball early and is quite direct with that.
Yeah, I agree. There's 3 things that you mentioned there that I was like, you know what, like you're spot on. I think just to backtrack a second, the first thing is the way they're using Miedema is that she's also going to get defended better and more, because teams are just getting more compact, more organized, which limits her space if she doesn't have the freedom to roam. The second thing about Figino on the right is, she's a really good possession based type of player on the ball, but did she have that dynamic threat that makes you as defenders go, I don't want to have to sprint backwards and defend that space because I know this player wants to push and run, or wants to deliver the ball early, so I've got to get out and press. Where you got Chloe Kelly, Hemp, Shaw, you've got that immediate fear factor, in my opinion. Having gone up against them before, you're thinking, I've got to deal with Shaw. Oh, I got to deal with Chloe Kelly, who might come inside or play on the outside, or Hemp with her pace and dribbling ability. I think they've lost a bit of that because everything has just been slowed down. And you could see in the game, especially on the right-hand side, like I said, because they had certain players playing out of position. You had Casper I move to the left, Naomi Lizelle on the right. They often passed the ball. They didn't really look to deliver early or put the ball in the box, where we know Bunny Shaw is just a handful. Sometimes you just got to put it in there and first phase, second phase, anything can happen.
For sure, and I touch on that, Neats, because for me, if Man City did their homework a little bit, knowing that Poppy Patterson obviously plays really high on that left-hand side, you would want to exploit those those spaces that Brighton leave in those transition moments. Now, I felt like, I'm speaking highly of Poppy, but I'm saying if you had a more threatening, for example, Chloe Kelly on that right-hand side, I can guarantee you the turnovers that Brighton had, they would have been hurt a lot more if Chloe Kelly was out there, because she's more direct. And then Poppy probably, and Brighton's pattern probably wouldn't have been as effective for as long as it was in that
defend.
Yeah, exactly.
Her centre back's going, come back, help.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, look, they got the result, and I think that's the most important thing. I think they missed a lot of chances in the second half. I think for me, Brighton tired a little bit as expected. I thought they give a good account of themselves. 55 minutes, they made a triple substitution. It kind of changed the game and the dynamic of how Brighton played a little bit. But to come away with just a 1-0 defeat, I think they'll be happy. And obviously City are happy to get those 3 points. But we'll go to Friday night, Neats. Obviously Chelsea played Crystal Palace, right? And all I've been hearing is, Chelsea Thrash, Palace 7-0 and talking really highly of Chelsea. Now, my first reaction to a 7-0 Chelsea win at Palace is I expect that.
Yeah.
That's a newly promoted team in Crystal Palace that got beat 4-0 last week at Tottenham. I expect a champion team. So Chelsea, let's not forget, they're WSL champions. I expect them to go to Palace and wipe the floor with them like they did. It took them, 38 minutes. I think Aggie Beaver Jones got the opening goal. Until 38 minutes, I felt, Palace were pretty solid. But I mean, I don't know what you think. Am I being harsh? Am I being I don't know. I don't know. Am I being harsh in thinking that Chelsea should go and wipe the floor with Crystal Palace?
No,
and not kind of get carried away. What I'm saying, I feel like people are getting carried away that there's a 7-0 thrashing of Crystal Palace.
No, not at all. I think, like you say, I think it should have been expected. Why would we not expect the champions to go, welcome to the WSL, to Crystal Palace? Let's be realistic.
Yeah, exactly.
When you look at their squad, they could field 2 starting 11s easily. The budget they've spent on players, on resources, they absolutely should be going out there and wiping the floor of Crystal Palace. And and they can't get carried away. I think we saw some really good things that they did. And in credit to Crystal Palace, like you said, for 30 odd minutes, they were in it. And they were, yes, Chelsea had lots of chances and they, squandered some of them. But I thought structurally they were really trying to be disciplined. They were really trying to make it difficult. And that's all they can do. And I think that's a good sign of a team that will learn a lot from a game like that. But yeah, I don't think it's a case of, they thrashed Crystal Palace, now they're going to run away with everything. No, because that's not the game that we're measuring them on. We're measuring them on when they play Arsenal, when they play Man City, when they play Man United, when they play those teams. That's what we're measuring them on, But of course, it's great to see Aggie Beaver Jones get on the score sheet, to continue the kind of form, maybe in the momentum that she had from last season. And, there was that impressive team goal, I thought, in terms of which is bringing maybe to like what Sonia can bring to the team, that kind of fluidity and the interchange of movement. But I know, we've probably all suffered defeats like that in the past.
Yeah. I mean, when I was at Reading, I think we used to get drawn to Arsenal every opening game of the season, and we'd set up, and it was like, you just know, however we set up, whether we set up defensively, whether we try and press and change it, we're going to get battered. And we did the same mistake 2 years on the bounce. Opening game, go to Arsenal, get battered 6-0. Oh, honestly, it's like
you still got PTSD by the sounds of it.
Oh, mate, honestly, it's like, even if you change your tactics, I mean, when you come up against top opposition, it's really difficult. And obviously, for Palace, they've had it quite difficult in terms of Spurs and then obviously Chelsea. But you've been there, Neat, with Bristol, a newly promoted team coming into WSL. How difficult is it for these newly promoted teams when they come up against the likes of, Chelsea and Arsenal, and now a more established Tottenham, for example? How difficult is it to keep your players motivated and patient in when they get the opportunity to play against the teams that are in and around them, that they're the kind of teams that you want to get the points off?
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure, and there's a certain reality to it. you know that these players haven't been exposed to the top tier in women's football for very long. And, some of those players are really young still. They're still on this journey of getting there. And in terms of motivation, having that buy-in to keep doing what you're trying to do in terms of your game plan, your structure, is really hard. And I think if Crystal Palace, who had breached Chelsea's defence a couple times in that game, had scored just one goal, for example, suddenly I think that also helps the morale of the team, because it's like, oh, we scored against a top team. Regardless of the result, we're able to do it. So maybe this will work against teams that are closer to us in terms of the level, quality, whatever it is. So that's the difficulty. But on the other side of that, when you've been in the championship and you've been playing your way of you want to play, in possession in particular, where you can be expansive, where you can express yourself on the ball and you dominate other teams, it's really hard to flip that mindset in your players now to then come to, the WSL, and now you're asking them to play in really defensive systems, perhaps. It's kind of different mentality in terms of being more compact, and you're going to spend more time, off the ball. So you're having to suffer, when there's players who are like, I just want to be on the ball. I just want to play football.
We've been there,
hard.
right? Yeah, I was going to say we've been there, and we've been in teams, especially our England teams, where we come up against the likes of Germany or America, and Hope at the time would be like, look, we're going to sit back, and you've got to get in your shape, and you've got to cut. Mate, it takes a lot up here to be engaged mentally, kind of keep that focus. But physically, I actually think at times physically, it's just as draining as it is to do a high press if you're all connected. So a high press, if you're connected, is equally as demanding as, say, you sitting in a block and shifting and pressing out little kind of those, those leggy type presses where you're just doing a couple of yards in front or to the left or right. They're just as much loading on your legs and fatiguing as, say, a 10, 15-yard sprint, in a higher press.
Definitely.
Like, I always find it, when you've played in it, which we both have, we played in a pressing team and as I say, a team that, wants to sit in.
Yeah.
I much prefer a team that I'm pressing in, as much as it, you probably in your head mentally are kind of talking yourself out of, I've got to do a higher press. It probably mentally feels a lot easier. I don't know. What do you think?
No, definitely, because I think when you're traveling forward at speed and you're attacking the game that way, at least you feel like you might force a mistake, right?
And at least you're closer to goal if you do that.
Yeah, exactly. And it naturally gives momentum to everyone, doesn't it? There's a bit of more of a buzz of energy. Whereas if you're constantly just shuffling sideways and backwards, and you're almost just thinking like, when is this game going to be over?
Oh, mate,
because I can't deal with this suffering any longer. Being off the ball, and you think like all those things, and you're worried about making mistakes because you're in your half or in the mid third, where it is more a threat. I agree. I'd rather that a team at times just go for it. Just go, believe that they, especially because actually not a great number, in my opinion, of players can really handle playing under high pressure.
Playing under pressure. Agree.
Or receiving even under high pressure. So why not challenge them a bit more to see what you can get out of those situations?
No, I agree. But mate, I do remember those days sitting in and not having the ball. We used to hate them. We'd moan about it all the time, especially me and you. We hated it.
Holding your hand, like, come on.
Oh, mate, I hated it. We had to be touched tight, close, so we could hold hands. Let's go back to Chelsea a bit. So, I've been asked a question about Bompastor, and I'm like, what have we noticed that's different? And I'm still, I think it's way too early to kind of assess that. I feel like you can obviously see she's continued that kind of environment, that culture that they created, that winning mentality, that know-how. The only thing there's a couple of tweets. You mentioned some before in terms of that kind of freedom of rotation in some areas. But also the only other thing I've really identified maybe is kind of change of personnel in terms of position where she sees them. Guru Brighton is an example of that, playing that in that more central 10 position. Emin Cuthbert, we did see do the deeper role with Emma Hayes, but somebody that I preferred that can kind of rat around and get higher and score goals. She seems to be a little bit more reserved in terms of her kind of positioning in the game. But have you noticed anything differently about kind of the Chelsea team at the minute as to what we saw under Emma Hayes, or would you agree it's too early?
I think I think it's too early to judge on just 2 games. Even some of the stats that I've seen out there on terms of touches in opposition box, chances created, and all those things. I'm like, we're measuring 10 years under or more
Yeah,
under Emma Hayes against 2 games for Sonia Bompastor. That's not
yeah,
going to give us a good sort of idea of what she can deliver or what she's trying to do. The only thing I can really look to is, like you said, seems like she's more open to trying out players in different roles, in different positions to see what they offer. Um, and the other thing I would say is, during my time at Chelsea under Emma, one of the blueprints that Emma always used to look to was Leon, right? And their transition play. How quickly do they go from attack to defense, or defense to attack? How quickly can they counter in those transition moments when they lose the ball? So I would say that's probably maybe a thing for us to look out for and see if
hmm
that's something that is evolved in Chelsea, especially when it comes to Champions League. When they
yeah.
start playing teams in Champions League, are they transitioning in those moments with way more intensity and way more kind of exuberance, if you like, as well?
Yeah, and look, you've mentioned it. Women's Champions League is obviously next week, the following week, so we're a week away from Chelsea's Open. And obviously, the news I think broke either this morning or yesterday
Yeah,
that Chelsea's fixture against Manchester United on the Sunday, which was a televised Sky game, has
yeah.
now been postponed to obviously give them enough time to play, obviously their opening group game against Real Madrid. Now, there's a few things on it, like obviously an evening kickoff on a Sunday and then a Tuesday game is not ideal, right? And so that
Mm.
is something that you probably wouldn't want. But for me, the question is, how much does televised games prioritize fixtures? Because Chelsea could have easily now had their, if they weren't a televised Sky game on a Sunday, could have played their fixture on the Saturday, say an afternoon game on a Saturday, and then still had their schedule in the Champions League on a Tuesday. Therefore, there'd be
Yeah.
no postponement. But I mean, what's your take on it? Because if they're going to do it now, it's going to have to be a consistent pattern throughout the season with all of our English clubs in terms of protecting them and giving them the best opportunity in Europe, right?
Well, yeah, that's the issue now they've caused themselves. The women's kind of what they call now WPLL, the professional league. They have caused themselves a problem because now they've gone back to UEFA. They've managed to get this game postponed to benefit players and player safety, which I agree with. We need to think
Yeah.
about players and loading and stuff like that. But now, if the other clubs, Arsenal, City, have an issue with scheduling, fixtures, TV, they equally will feel they have the right to challenge the schedule
Mm-hmm.
alongside TV. And of course, I don't think TV should dictate fixtures
Mm.
personally, because if we are talking about player safety, then it's about, can they play a game? You can't play games, within 48 hours. It's about recovering all those things. Then you have to factor that in. But ultimately, it's a relationship where money, investment, all of that is coming into the game because of the visibility they're getting from TV as
Mm.
well. And I think a really important point to mention is the fact that UEFA are stating that the calendar was already designed a year ago.
Okay, so they kind of already knew the fixtures,
So
right?
they are
Like
saying,
the group stages of the Champions League were going to be this week. So in terms of
yes,
the TV broadcasting picks should have been kind of in advance. They would have been well in advance prepared for that and kind of should have thought
yeah,
about maybe their selection of team, because we know every WSL team has to be shown on
exactly.
broadcast, right? So through whether it be Sky or BBC. Now this could be the weekend. Actually, Chelsea don't. Chelsea Man United. Look, it's a massive fixture. It's a fixture that
Yeah,
everybody wants to see. Why can't the TV Sky who are showing this game, can they not do it on a Friday night or Saturday, so the game still goes ahead as planned in terms of that match day weekend free or match week free, so that they still have enough time to recover for the Champions League, and then we don't have that backlog of games come the end of the season, depending on how far again
yeah.
Chelsea progress in the Champions League.
Well, that would require them to shift some of their scheduling about, I think, to allow that to happen. But I think that ultimately, UEFA are saying, we have been transparent from the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. We've given you the full
Yeah.
calendar. It's for you to decide where your fixtures go or don't go, related to the benefit of the teams. It's also related to the draw, so that the English clubs aren't all playing the same day, same time, etc., so that everyone gets the sort of best value for, watching and seeing those
Yeah.
games as well. So it's a bit of a mess, actually, because
Just a
someone's made an
bit. Just
error.
a bit.
Someone's made
Just a
an
bit.
error here,
Yeah.
But obviously, for Chelsea, it's great that they've managed to do that, to give
Yeah, I
themselves.
mean, for the players, look, it's always great because, as I say, I wouldn't want to. You know what it was like. I mean, you think back to when we played in the Euros, for example, like 2005 through to 2009 needs in the
Yeah.
Euros, or even 2013, we were still playing.
Mm.
Only a day between the group stage fixtures. I don't know if you remember, we'd play on like a
Yeah,
Monday,
yeah,
for example. We'd have Tuesday off, and our second group game would be on a Wednesday. So
yeah.
you
The
think back to
bodies.
when we used to try and manage competitions back then, and I'm talking European Championship. We had a day to recover. Now they get 2, 3, 4 days in between games,
Yeah,
which they need because the 48 hours after a game is the most crucial time in terms of that recovery. So it totally makes sense in terms of player well-being, which is what and safety, and that's what we want, and that's
yeah.
what players have voiced. But as you said, I mean, broadcasting and the kind of that kind of scheduling, how they've got it so wrong so early into the season, just causes a problem further down the line because, as I say, now they've done it for Chelsea. It has to be a consistent thing for all of the
But
English teams
but it
involved in Champions League.
has a potential cyclical effect. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
knock-on effect, doesn't it, for the fixtures down the road, for other clubs who now are thinking, well, can we put this in, and if we're in this competition, where does that go? And
Yeah.
also, from a coach's perspective, you're planning your week, your whole season. You've planned your whole maybe periodization or whatever, the whole season in like blocks of time.
Yeah.
And now you're having to sort of think, okay, what am I doing? I've got to change it up a little bit to make sure we get the best out of training for the players who don't play, all of
True.
that as well into your planning. So there's so much involved in getting this stuff right.
Well, we'll see how right they get it moving forward from here. But yeah, that postponement of Chelsea Manchester United. I mean, it was a sellout at Kings Meadow, but that game will be
Yeah.
postponed to help with the UEFA Champions League fixture, the women's one. But two more things needs before we kind of finish up on this. Obviously, I saw a lot of people criticising Arsenal of their 1-0 win over Leicester. Now, there was a lot of criticism around that. Now, I'm somebody that's looking at it and going, this Arsenal team last year, in the same position, probably would have come away from that game with a draw. So
Yeah.
the fact that they've come away from a game where they was on top and they created chances, and obviously Leicester obviously had chances as well, the fact they've come away with 3 points, for me, that's massive progression. That's a team that is kind of showing the kind of qualities that you need if you are to compete and win the WSL, right?
Yeah.
But also on that, the frustration around Arsenal and kind of all the changes they make week to week in terms of, if they are to compete, is that going to help or hinder them? The fact that they change their kind of starting 11 game to game and there's kind of no consistency. Like, what's your thoughts on that, on both of those 2 points?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important, number one, that they get results away on the road, right? We know
Yeah.
how important that is to get those points, and every team is improving. So
Mm-hmm.
those, score lines that people are expecting, I think we're going to see far fewer of them, as we saw this past weekend. What
Mm-hmm.
was it? 5 games, 1-0. So
Yeah.
that goes to show you about the margins. But I do think there is something in the having continuity in a team. I don't know. I at least from my perspective and my own experiences, the teams where there's been more regular lineups, I feel like you just have more time to build the connections and the relationships on the pitch, and then when you have that kind of foundation that's so solid, it's then
Mm.
easier to bring other players into games at certain
Yeah.
points of the game or across the season for different types of games. But it feels like week to week, and we saw this a bit last season, there's constant rotations and changes. And so for the players, sometimes you probably lose a bit of like clarity
Mm.
because different personnel also possess different strengths as
Yeah.
well. So
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, you've got to be adaptable, but that kind of feeling of playing football where you're not thinking about it. You're just
Mm-hmm.
playing kind of like
It's natural, right? Just
intuitively, and it's just a flow and everything just clicks and works. That comes from just playing together
yeah.
quite often.
Oh, you're right. I was going to say, I'm thinking back when I first signed for Reading, and then look, they weren't a top team, but they're certainly a team in terms of that. The tactical were very, very good. Now we had a consistent 11 pretty much without an injury. Like if we didn't have an injury, then kind of the 11 stayed the same and finished
Yeah.
fourth in a season. And we finished fourth. And then what we tried to do was trying to build that squad and make it bigger. But then what that meant is more competition, more people that are going to be unhappy if they're not getting the minutes and blah, blah, blah. And then you see one or two coming out, and then it go from one or two to kind of 3 or 4 over the 3 years that, that I was there. I mean, you go from a team that's competing, in the top 4 to a team that 3 years after that are relegated, or 4 years after that are relegated.
Yeah.
And I'm talking from a perspective of a team with lesser qualities than what Arsenal have. But in terms of what you can achieve, if you can kind of keep that consistency, I think that demonstrates it no matter what level you're playing at. And I think Arsenal, we saw a lot last year, a lot of rotations in terms of their team. You couldn't guess their starting 11 at times. And I'm not sure it kind of helps the team in terms of those connections. And that's probably why they have a bit more inconsistencies to the likes, if you compare the likes of Man City and Chelsea.
Yeah, because I think ultimately it always comes back to what is your fundamental goal as a team, right? The team, you want to win. You want to win games. You want to win the title. If everyone's collectively still geared towards that goal, then that man management or player management part of it becomes somewhat easier, because players are understanding that, the environment is competitive. We're pushing each other to bring the best out of each other every week. But you almost know as well what the lineup that is performing the best as players. Like if you're really honest with yourself and you self-reflect enough, you know that too. So I don't think it helps the team if you're just trying to keep people happy, because it's inauthentic and everyone feels it in the changing room, right? Or in the squad. So I think it's, it's all about those relationships as well, and that dynamic. So you've got to be, I just think as a manager, you've got to be honest as well, but real, but that they're trying to compete on all, in all competitions. So it's not like players won't get chances to play in that team with that quality. I mean, look at Marnham, Marnham, she played several games last season and then played a whole chunk of games where she didn't play, right? This season she's come right back into the team and is flying, is scoring goals. And I think, well, she's doing well for the team. She's performing. You're going to reward her, I think. You're going to keep saying, you should be in the lineup. You should be in the lineup. And that's part of it too.
Yeah, for sure. Let's hope that their kind of inconsistencies in terms of the starting 11 don't hinder them again. Because, I mean, for me, if they just are to win another cup in terms of FA Cup and Conti Cup, I'm not sure that's enough for this Arsenal team moving forward. But anyway, we'll just round up the results from the weekend, Needs. Won't touch too much on them. We did a lot on Chelsea, City and Arsenal, but kind of they're the kind of teams that we've been looking at sitting in the top 3. So it was obviously Manchester City won against Brighton 1-0. Liverpool drew 1-1 to West Ham. I heard Matt Beard weren't happy with that result. We obviously had Tottenham draw 2-2 to Villa, 2 teams that are looking to push that top 6 this year. We had Arsenal beat Leicester away 1-0, and then we had Chelsea, obviously the 7-0 win against Crystal Palace on the Friday night. That rounds up our Boots, Balls and Bras WSL Week 2. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like, comment, subscribe. Is that what you say? Is that how you do it? I don't know, Needs. What is it? YouTube? You're into all of that, no?
You nailed it. You nailed it.
Do? Like, comment, and subscribe. That's what we want, isn't it? And obviously, guys, if you want to share, if you want, as I said, we keep putting it out there. But anything you want us to talk about, just drop us a line, and we're more than happy. Whether it's our careers, whether it's about your clubs that you support, whatever it is. Any controversy over the weekend, and obviously we missed a bit, Neats, because we probably should have mentioned the Lauren James potential second yellow card. We'll touch on that maybe next week. We don't have time for that this week, and we probably don't want to lose Lauren's friendship right now. But anything you want us to talk about, it'll be helpful that you write in and kind of let us know, or put something in the comments below. But that's it for us this week, and we look forward to you joining us next week. Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back every week throughout the WSL season, so tell your mates and all get involved. If you've got a point you think we should discuss, or you want to put us on the spot with a question you want answering, comment down below on this episode or on our social media channels. Make sure you leave us a review and follow Boots, Balls and Bras to never miss an episode.